This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. We got a lot to get to today, you guys. Going to dive into Nelson Cruz here in a minute. But we got Randy Johnson coming up a little bit after that. Covers Gophers football for the Star Tribune. He is in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Day. Talked to a lot of Gophers players. Talked to head coach PJ Fleck. They kind of made the rounds with all the other teams and all the other big stories with college football. So looking forward to that conversation with Randy Johnson here in a little bit. And we'll get to the Wild as well. The NHL draft first round is Friday night. The Wild have two first-round picks, number 21 and 25, more or less. It's officially 22 and 26, but Arizona forfeiting their pick moves everybody up the board one pick. So we'll see what the Wild are able to do with that. You know, NHL players don't generally jump into the lineup right away, but guys that could be helpful in a year or two at the very earliest anyway. So we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first, what did I miss? Going to spend a lot of time on Nelson Cruz, the Twins slugger, traded on Thursday for a couple of prospects to Tampa Bay. And, I got a lot of thoughts about this. First off, I don't know if a guy who is only here for 258 games, a full season, a shortened season, and then part of this one can really have an era, but it sure feels like this is, if there was a Nelson Cruz era, if there was an era that defined kind of this part of the Twins, this kind of brings some closure to it, doesn't it? In a weird way, and kind of a sad way. You had the Bomba squad of 2019. Nelson Cruz was a huge part of that. Now, tons of guys had a lot of home runs. He hit 41 that year, kind of led the charge, was a centerpiece of that team. And I remember two things from that season completely stand out to me. One was being at Target Field for the opener that year. It was a pitcher's duel, but even just seeing Nelson Cruz for the first time in the middle of that lineup, I wasn't there for spring training, wasn't down in Florida for any of that, but just seeing him, take his at-bats, get up to the plate, even just seeing his name in the lineup and how it transformed everyone around him, takes the pressure off so many different players in that lineup. And you got someone like Nelson Cruz in the middle of that order. You kind of know what to expect from him. He's going to give you good at-bats. He's going to hit the ball over the fence. He's going to do all sorts of Nelson Cruz things. Just makes things so much easier. And you looked at that lineup and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to predict 307 home runs, which is what they did, but it certainly looked like an offense that made a lot more sense with him in the lineup, even though it had been a good offense in years past, and that certainly came to pass in 2019. Now, the other thing I remember, I go on a baseball road trip with my friends pretty much every year. Now, we've had some interruptions, obviously, from COVID in 2020, and again, this year, we had an abbreviated get-together this year at the very least, but 2019 was the last real official baseball road trip. It was the 20th one we had done in a row. This trip took us to Chicago for 4 straight Twins-White Sox games. It's late July. Twins are really starting to falter. They're falling back in the race. Some bullpen problems, some other things plaguing them. They get to Chicago kind of teetering a little bit. They get to that first game against the White Sox on Thursday. I'll never forget. Nelson Cruz comes to the plate, bottom of the first inning, hits an absolute moonshot home run, I believe off of Lucas Giolito. First of 3 home runs that he would hit in that game, and just absolutely dominated that game, willed the Twins to victory in that game, just shook the offense completely to life, made sure they were not going to lose that game. And again, there were some tenuous moments the rest of that season, but that game stood out to me as a defining moment, and what Nelson Cruz did in that game, because wasn't so much a get on my back moment. It was just a, hey, I'm still here, we're still here, I'm going to hit these home runs, and let's see where we can go. And they ended up winning the division with 101 victories. Now, all that said, it was time. This was inevitable, right? This season didn't go anywhere according to plan. Nelson Cruz still having a good year, last year of his contract, 41 years old, still a very productive player, a guy that a lot of different people could use. And so you looked at it, and intellectually, you just looked at it and you said, a Nelson Cruz trade absolutely makes sense for all parties involved. That doesn't mean it's not sad, doesn't mean it's not disappointing for fans. It just means that it was kind of one of those things where even if you didn't like it, you knew that it was inevitable. And if it was inevitable, You were hoping the Twins would do as well as possible as they could in the trade. And that was the sentiment I got from a lot of you on Twitter. Maybe I'll read a few of the tweets. I asked, how are we feeling about this trade? Here's a few of your tweets right now. Let's run through a few of them now. Samuel says, was expecting it, but still going to miss him. Am a Rays fan as of July 2021 through October 2021. Crying emoji. David said, inevitable. Hopefully the players they've signed acquired. So hopefully the players they've acquired have some value. We'll get to that in a minute. Steve says it was inevitable. We got a pitcher who now ranks 6th in our farm system. Astute. For a 41-year-old soon-to-be free agent, can't be mad in the slightest degree. I think the haul was very good, and again, we'll get to that a little bit more in a little bit. Tim says, it stinks that his run with the club ended without contending, but excited that the team got some quality players back. He could have just left via free agency before this season. That is true. Stains of concern, inevitable. The almost 13-year-old is crushed, but as a good father, I have prepared him. Tyann says, knew it was coming, still stinks, though. He went to a good team, happy for him, got a better return than I thought. So a lot of these very similar, people upset and sad, understanding, though, that this was the right thing to do. And so, I think this is, all around, even if you're disappointed as a Twins fan, even if you're, upset about what's been lost in this community. I want to read one more, actually. Stephen Baker, significant loss for this community. We don't often get great role models in pro sports around here. This on top of losing Parisi, Suter, and Rudolph adds to a lot of good guys gone. And you can't overstate that. People go to the games to see players they like, to see players who are good. Nelson Cruz, certainly likable. A lot of things to like about him, and that piece of it can't be forgotten. But I thought he was done for about 6 weeks ago, and then he went on a tear. You can doubt him at your own peril, even at age 41. It's good for him though. Gets to go to Tampa Bay, a contending team. It's smart by the Twins. It shows veterans that they'll move them to better situations, and it shows that the front office isn't going to get overly emotional about decisions, even if there is emotion involved. And I think there was a little bit of that sentiment in the quote from Rocco Baldelli after the Twins lost 3-2 to the Angels, not long after finding out that Nelson Cruz had been traded.
Well, the feeling, our guys... we're certainly able to prepare for the game and we're ready to play, but it's impossible to not also, acknowledge and know, that we just lost, a member of our team who has been about as important to this organization and to our group as any player has ever been to an organization that I've been around, that I've seen. So, that was, difficult, and we all grow and we all, the game always goes on and everything like that. But we have an incredible number of memories with Nelson. I think there were a lot of very heartfelt words from him, from other people to him. I think everyone wanted to take the opportunity to let him know how much he has meant to them individually. And like I said, to this organization as well. You can't have more of an impact on a team than Nelson Cruz has had here.
Now, for his part, Cruz had this to say: it was shocking. I don't even think when you're expecting something like this, you can prepare for this. It hit me when they told me, and it hit me when I went into the locker room to see my teammates. That's when it really hit me. It was emotional. And I imagine that's the case. I mean, he came here late in his career. He won 2 division titles, did not win a single playoff game, but that wasn't his fault. He was often their most productive hitter in those playoff games. Their one consistent threat in that lineup that didn't kind of wilt in the pressure of the moment. He was everything they could have asked for here and more. That said, like I said, I think they got a tremendous haul. I think they really did. If you look at what they got for a guy who is basically a rental, he's going to Tampa Bay for 2 months, then the end of his contract, and who knows how much longer a 41-year-old is going to play, even as well as he has played this year. They get 2 guys who have pitched in AAA this year and pitched pretty well: Joe Ryan and Drew Strotman. Ryan looks like the slightly better prospect. He was ranked number 13 in Tampa Bay's system. He's in Tokyo with Team USA right now, by the way. 25 years old, just turned 25. Had a 3.63 ERA, 75 strikeouts, and 57 innings in AAA this season. Walks and hits to innings pitched of just .79. It's pretty stingy. Looks like he's got good stuff. He's had good strikeout numbers all throughout his minor league career. Those are good numbers, peripheral and otherwise. I'm kind of excited to see what he can do. Stroutman, similarly, turns 25 in a couple months. His numbers this year pretty similar to Ryan in terms of ERA. Fewer strikeouts a little bit more walks, but plenty of upside there as well. Both of them right-handers. 25 years old is not over the hill for AAA. They seem like they're kind of knocking on the door and could get a chance. Now, Ryan was the number 10 prospect in the Rays organization. Stroutman was number 17, according to MLB.com. Now, after the trade, interestingly, they were slotted in as number 6 and number 13 in the Twins prospect chart. And maybe that's a nod to, the relative depth, you suppose, of those two organizations. Kind of shows the lack of quality arms, quality players, maybe relative to Tampa Bay. At least Tampa Bay is thought to have a very good farm system, by the way. They're constantly restocking, constantly relying on those lower salaried players to carry them through in the low budget times. But getting two pitchers from Tampa Bay, a team that is thought of very highly in their development of pitchers, you worry a little bit that Tampa Bay was willing to part with them because maybe they, know something and don't see that as much upside as you might like. But, getting two prospects, even that were in the top 20 of Tampa Bay's system, one of whom was top 10, who now slide into the top 15 of the Twins chart, that's pretty good. I would expect to see these guys at some point this year, maybe. I mean, these guys are in AAA. They're 25. There's possibly going to be some rotation holes. I mean, even if there aren't, you can make rotation holes because this rotation has not been great this year. But you can imagine Jay Happ getting traded before the deadline. You can imagine Michael Pineda getting traded before the deadline. I mean, this Nelson Cruz deal is probably just the first of 3 or 4, you would imagine, even if there's not the blockbuster, Jose Barrios deal, which could still happen, by the way. But even if there's not, there's some peripheral moves that could open up some rotation spots. And I'd be interested to see if these guys are going to get a shot this year, even, August, September, to see what they can do, especially, Ryan, once the Olympics are done, once that's all finished up. So we'll see, kind of what's in store for them, how much the Twins want to pitch these guys. I know there's this concern about minor league guys who missed last season with the COVID and not having minor league seasons, but I'd be curious if they want to get a look at these guys in the big league uniform, see what they've got, because they could be potential answers going forward, or at least guys you want to get a look at and know what you're dealing with, along with some of your other prospects. So, bottom line, I think it's a sad day for Twins fans, but if you get past the emotion of it, if you can kind of separate yourself from the feeling of Nelson Cruz, I think the Twins did awfully well in this trade. I don't think you could ask for a whole lot more than 2, close to ready arms that you can find out about sooner rather than later, and see where they go from here. So I'll be interested to see if they can do as well with some of these other moves. It could give you a little bit more hope for a quicker turnaround than things look like they're going right now.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to have on Daily Delivery today. Randy Johnson does a great job covering Gopher football for the Star Tribune, among other things. He is in Indianapolis, Big Ten football media day. That tells you we're getting closer to the season, getting closer to the start of, training camp, as it were, for the Gophers. Expectations reasonably high, I think, for this year's team based on the depth they have, the age and experience of some of their players. But Randy, first off, thanks for jumping on. And what, as the Gophers talked Thursday at Media Day, what, were there any themes that you saw emerging, whether it's related to them specifically or, the Big Ten or college football as a whole?
It was not just Gophers, but everybody that all the 7 coaches that spoke today, and the other 7 will go tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot of the same. But just the happiness to be there after a year of hiatus. They didn't have this event last year. They moved it from Chicago to Indy this year at Lucas Oil Stadium. Nice big spread out type of thing. And instead of like the usual, just happy to be there, it seemed like there was a lot of sincerity behind the words and everything. Another, probably the most interesting stuff from the day was just their reaction to the newfound freedom that college athletes have now with name, image, and likeness, and how things are proceeding forward with that. It was a pretty good talker among the players, among the coaches, and they're all for it. Obviously, players don't mind having a little more money in their pocket if they can, and it's interesting to see what some of them are doing, how they're handling it. I see today that Gopher running back Mo Ibrahim has joined the Blake Barrett's agency in town. So, it's proceeding with some of those. Tanner Morgan's already been doing some cameo stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting thing there. One of the kind of a funnier anecdote was somebody was asking PJ Fleck where like if you would have had a chance to make something off your name and image back when you're at Northern Illinois, where would you have done? And he goes, well, there's a bar grill called Fatty's that that would have been that I was at, but NCAA might have frowned on that. And he mentioned his love of architecture in the Sears Tower, and then in DeKalb mentioned John Deere tractors. So and that somehow he would have paired Sears and John Deere.
Nice. Well, it's a cool thing for players. I'm sure they're still sorting out kind of what it all means. But it sounds like it's got to be I'm sure as they figure that out, that's got to be a big thing for them to kind of talk about and figure out how they make money off of, just who they are and what they represent as athletes. Right.
Yeah. It's interesting, how they can, just partner with different companies. And then one of the Nebraska players, I forget which one, was saying that this is going to be big in Nebraska. We don't have an NFL team. We don't have, anything, we're the big team in town. So, I think it's going to be, he thought it would be pretty important for them. They'd be pretty prominent on things like that. Another side of it was a Michigan defensive end, Aiden Hutchinson. He was talking about it. He went into it pretty gung-ho and everything, pretty wanted to learn a lot about it and, got involved in some things. And then after a while, he said it just got a little bit old. It got a little bit overwhelming. So he's got his parents handling it. This is his mom, she's always marketing him anyway, so she can handle it and he doesn't have to deal with the mundane part of it, I guess.
Coaches hate the dreaded distractions, so I'm sure it's going to be kind of a push-pull there. And they, I think one interesting thing is I don't know how much they can restrict athletes' social media use anymore if that's a vehicle for them to be making money.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing to look at. And most of them, most of the coaches did, they were all for this. They weren't really talking a whole lot about distractions yet. They want to educate their players. PJ Fleck was stressing that quite a bit, saying, they got to realize too, now, along with this money comes taxes. You have to pay taxes on these earnings, things like that. There's stuff that you want to have covered, and you want them to know and not to enter into something that might come back to bite them.
Just get paid in Venmo and don't write it what it was in the transaction field. So a bigger thing, I think, on the field, I think we'll get into some stuff of, what the Gophers might look like on the field here in a little bit. But I feel like one of the themes must have also been still a year later, feeling like this season will still be touched by COVID in a lot of ways. We're talking about vaccinations. We're talking about fans, hopefully, in the stands at full capacity, like we've seen at a lot of these other sporting events. But, what's the kind of the mood with, how they're approaching that, as a league and specifically with PJ Fleck and the Gophers?
Well, I think, across the league, it's in cross college football, it's fingers crossed. Coach has been encouraging players to get vaccinated all throughout the country. That's and like PJ was, he didn't reveal a specific number of who has been vaccinated, but he said it was highly significant percentage, and that it's growing each day. So he emphasized too that, well, the players do know the repercussions if you do get sick, they went through it last year, and the Big Ten hasn't determined yet if they will reschedule games if all of a sudden a team or two doesn't have enough players. Other conferences have said, now the NFL also basically saying that, hey, you're on your own. You'll forfeit if you can't field the team. I think the Big Ten is still, according to Commissioner Kevin Warren, is still investigating that. Having each team report, and then they'll make a determination closer to the start of the season.
Yeah, I imagine though it's a different thing to navigate. A lot more positives in terms of navigating that than there were last year. Having fans in the stands, Gophers, Ohio State to kick off the season. That's not, much more than a little over a month away now. Right. I mean, so
yeah,
that should be a lot of fun. On the field, now you had Tanner Morgan, Mo Ibrahim, and Boy Mafe. Were those the Gopher player representatives today?
Yes, they were. Those three.
There's plenty to get to with all three of those guys, but obviously it probably wasn't just local media asking that. What are the kind of things that they're getting asked? What do you get the sense of people's kind of thoughts and opinions of the Gophers based on, some of how those dialogues go, how those interviews went with those guys?
I from the people from other media markets, I got a lot of would say they're curious about Tanner Morgan and if he can have a bounce back season. And they're really curious about him facing Ohio State and the Gophers playing an Ohio State team that's breaking into a quarterback to start the season. So they're kind of seeing, okay, what can we expect out of the Gophers? Will they have an offense that can put up some points against Ohio State? Other themes were looking at Mo Ibrahim, the Big Ten running back of the year. Will the Gophers have to rely on him as much as they did last year? He rushed for over 1,000 yards in 7 games. Averaged over 150 a game. So yeah, it's. I think people are curious to see. They see that opening game against Ohio State, and there's some interesting opening games this year. Penn State and Wisconsin meet in the opener. So that first week's gonna be fun.
We're going to find out a lot about those teams right away. It doesn't define your season, but yeah, it's not like you're playing, no offense, but it's not like you're playing, Appalachian State or Middle Tennessee State. You're playing Ohio State. That's a little different. It's a different state school than some of those other ones you might typically face in a non-conference setting. PJ's not saying they're young this year, are they? I hope he's not.
He is not. He has not said that. And then he received a question from one of the local reporters about you probably have the oldest team in the country this year. So yeah, they're very set at. You look at that offensive line. They return 7 or 8 guys, maybe even 9 who've started games, but they have a main 6 or 7 there that's had seen extensive time. So they should be able to hang their head on that. That's going to be a key. You got a guy like Daniel Faalele returning. PJ was saying that he's down to about 380, looking really good. So that'll be a big help.
And they've got like 5th-year guys, 6th-year guys. Don't they even have like a couple 7th-year guys because of the way things broke down?
Bryce Witham, tight end, is a 7th-year guy. I imagine there's a medical red shirt in there. And I believe Micah Treadway, also the Notre Dame transfer. So yeah, it's COVID and transfers and medical things add up to, it's not like, 7 years of college down the drain. You might as well join the Peace Corps, that type of thing. It's
Are they arbitration eligible or at least restricted free agents at this point? I mean,
you would think so.
They might have a more experienced offensive line than the Vikings. They might be just as old as the Vikings offensive line when you say
I should look into that. That'd be a nice little
Because
chart.
Probably an exaggeration, but it's probably not that far off based on the youth of some of those Vikings players. What about Randy Johnson enjoying this conversation about the Gophers? What was some of the other kind of league talk? What else did you visit while you were there Thursday?
There was talk about the ongoing debate on expansion of the college football playoff. Kevin Warren kind of, didn't say a whole lot about it, but they'll be exploring it. Pat Fitzgerald, for one, Northwestern's coach, is very much in favor of that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Here's a team that, 2 of the past 3 years they've won the Big Ten West and then lost in the Big Ten title game to Ohio State. And right now, but the only way to get to the college football playoff is winning the Big Ten championship game. Now, if it expands to 12, maybe there's room for a runner-up or a division champ, or a runner-up, or say a second team that is a non-division champ that has a 12-1 record, something like that.
That's got to be attractive to a team like the Gophers, I'd imagine, just because it's hard to imagine, even in their best year, the Gophers going, being one of the 4 best teams in the country. 2 years ago, it was not out of the question that they could have gotten to that game at least, and they would have had a chance at least. But you could see them being a top 12 team in the right year, a lot easier than a top 4 team. It's just math, but it's also just where these programs are at. I think it gives 30 teams more of a chance to make a playoff than just 12, just 8 more. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at it, a program like Michigan, as proud as they are, they've yet to make the college football playoff. You would have thought by now that might have been one that would somehow get there, but they haven't been able to get past Ohio State under Harbaugh. And obviously that was brought up today in his press conference too. So, yep. So what's last thing for you, Randy? What's next steps? What's the kind of the calendar looking like? And what are some of the things we should be kind of on the lookout for as they get ready for camp and get ready to start up here? Yeah, camp will be starting in early August. I don't have the exact date yet. It's about a couple weeks out. Yeah, a week and a half or so. Yeah. Well, tomorrow is the second half of the Big Ten. Right. 2 of the teams of interest in the media days are Wisconsin and Iowa tomorrow. Two teams that have been the roadblock to the Gophers. Yeah. To that Big Ten title game. Once we get into camp, and then it's like kind of see where the team comes together. Obviously they're very experienced on offense. Should be a pretty good offense. Defense, it's more of a work in progress. I don't think it'll be. We'll have the struggles they did, especially early last year, but. And he seems to have PJ seemed to have filled some nice holes with some transfers. That'll be intriguing. I think they'll be healthier on that end too. Sounds good, Randy. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more once the camp gets going and the season gets going. Thanks for joining me today from Indy. Follow all of Randy's work. Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Follow him on Twitter at RJ Strib. Is that your Twitter handle? RJ Strib. Yep. And thanks, Randy. We'll catch you again down the road. Okay. Thanks a lot, Mike. Talk to you later. Excellent stuff from Randy. Love catching up with him. He's back on the Gopher football beat this season. He's done a great job of it in past years as well. I'm kind of excited about this season. I admit within the COVID season, I didn't pay as much attention to the Gophers and even, other sports as I might normally. Just a lot of other things on my mind, even though that's my profession, even though I'm paid to do that and did that a lot still. Maybe wasn't as invested in some things as I would have been. So looking forward to kind of seeing where this team is at in 2021, because it sure sounds like there could be some good things coming for them this season. Let's end with the cooler. NHL draft starts Friday night. Wild has 2 first-round picks, only the second time in their organizational history that they've had 2 first-round picks, the second one coming from Pittsburgh via the Jason Zucker trade from a couple years back. So an opportunity here for Bill Guerin. They've got 5 picks in the top 3 rounds. They also have an extra third-round pick this season. An opportunity. We again, like I said at the outset of the show, you don't, it's not like the NBA where these guys get drafted and often, come in necessarily right away. Might take a little while for, a first round pick to get a little bit of seasoning. Some of them might stay in college. Some of them might stay at the amateurs for a little while before they turn pro. That's fine. That said, these are the guys they're going to have to be replacing. Zach Parise, Ryan Suter, they're going to have to be their low-cost replacements to, while the salary cap is, just obliterated in a few years, and then they're carrying 15% cap charges for 2 guys that aren't on the roster anymore. They're going to be relying on a lot of these guys on entry-level contracts. So the moves they make right now, the draft picks they make right now, are going to be essential in 2023, 2024, things like that. So it's important to pay attention. Drafts are always important, especially when you have an extra first-round pick. we'll see what they're able to do, if they want to package those picks, if they want to move down and add more picks, if they want to package one for a player. A lot of flexibility, a lot of possibilities for them right now. So Bill Guerin on the clock pretty soon. It's been a pretty interesting tenure for him so far. He had a lot of mess to clean up, inherited some good players, but he had inherited a lot of mess that he's got to clean up. This is just the beginning of building the foundation of this team for future years ahead. Thanks for joining me on this Friday Daily Delivery so much. We'll be back at it Monday. Got some good stuff coming up next week. I'm sure I'll talk to Patrick Royce, hoping to get our Olympics riders from Tokyo, maybe some Vikings talk with camp opening up there. I'll have our intern, Christina Long, on next week. And by the way, I'm going to turn the show over to her for a couple days at some point in August. So look forward to that as well. Be nice to her when she's taking the reins of this show. We'll be back at it Monday. Thanks for listening.